How about Bama and Georgia yesterday? We'll start with Alabama, 49-9. You wanted an answer? I know I did. I wanted an answer after Bama goes to, how little sense does this make, by the way, now? They go to College Station and they lose. And for all of you transitive property types out there, I want you to make sense of this one for me. So Mississippi State goes into College Station, they beat A&M. Bama goes in there and gets upset, and then Bama goes and just wood chippers Mississippi State, 49-9 yesterday. Padlock stat time. Got a couple of them, actually. But here's really the only one you need. If Alabama is ever 12 of 16 on third down against you, you will lose the football game. If, padlock stat number 2, if you were -3 turnovers against Alabama, you will lose the football game. Both of these were the case for Mississippi State yesterday. This was about as emphatic an answer as we could have ever asked for. There was a lot of talk around the Bama program this week. After they go to Texas A&M and they lose, of course, Nick Saban is barely off the field yet before he starts talking about how are you going to harness it? How are you going to respond? They responded. Will Anderson, by the way, see, he ran his mouth a lot this week in a good way, but the reason Will Anderson can run his mouth is because with an entire quarter of ball to play last night, Will Anderson had already harassed Will Rogers to the tune of 4 sacks and probably could have just kept going and going and going and going. There's a lot of Energizer Bunny vibe, among other vibes, with Will Anderson. So he had 4 sacks. Trayshawn Holden was a name that popped up yesterday 3 times, I think 70 yards receiving. You need to keep an eye on him because we keep asking about that Bama receiving core. Are we going to have a couple of more candidates emerge? John Mechie had a good day yesterday. Jamison Williams is who he is. But Trayshawn Holden's a guy. Not one of the names that maybe you expected, but Trayshawn Holden. You've heard his name before. He's appeared. He's been sprinkled in the old Bama box score a time or two, but he popped up yesterday. But Nick Saban, I'll tell you the most entertaining part of this that you probably didn't see. They're up 14-3, and Saban went into Xbox mode. He went into let the fans call the game mode, as close as you'll ever see him go. Because everybody around Bama has been irate all week that they go full spread formation, throw the ball 3 times inside the 5-yard line, 1st and goal, and they don't get it done. Actually throw a pick last week with Brian Robinson ready, willing, and able to carry the mail into the end zone, and Evan Neal, it's like 7'4", 500 pounds over at left tackle. And so yesterday, I kid you not, you need to go back and watch it if you haven't already, there they are. And the situation, I think it was 3rd and goal, they were on the 1, and they go empty backfield. And so Nick Saban, as he sometimes is not one to do, actually uses one of his timeouts. He has a whole collection of them in the locker room. Nick Saban loves to take timeouts in the locker room. And that will conclude my criticism of Nick Saban. Well, Saban burns a timeout. And then he burned Bill O'Brien as well as the timeout, because when they came back out, I think they drove a couple of dump trucks out there and went as heavy as they possibly could, and they put Robbie Oots over there at fullback, and it was no mystery. In fact, they could have yelled the play across the line of scrimmage, and Mississippi State could have done nothing to stop it, because when you have a guy like Evan Neal and you have a guy like Brian Robinson, there are simple laws of nature that you cannot counter. And if you run behind them, you will score. It's really that basic. Sometimes it doesn't have to be coaches, clinic, chalk talk, all kinds of different motions and pre-snap shifts. Sometimes you can just go full-on caveman on people, and Alabama did. Nick Saban was asked about it in postgame yesterday, and he came as close to saying, yeah, I basically dropped the elbow on Bill O'Brien and called my own offensive play, as you'll ever hear him come. And so that was Alabama's game. Georgia beat Kentucky 30-13. I got a padlock stat for you here, too. If you are Kentucky and you amass a total of 64 yards rushing against Georgia, you will lose the football game. And that's what happened yesterday. Padlock stat that wasn't really a stat at all, but I thought the biggest overlooked portion of this game and play in this game was when the ball was on the ground. And this was still a game at this point. Georgia put the ball on the ground, and Kendall Milton, as everyone else is looking around waiting for the next play to happen, realizes it's a fumble, or just realizes I better get on it in case it's a fumble, and it was a live ball. And he hops on that thing. Georgia retains possession, gets 8 yards out of it, by the way, I think. Next play, they score. Ball game. For all intents and purposes, ball game. You never know what that's worth. You never know. I can guarantee you Kendall Milton, I don't know, whatever they hand out there, a belt, a chalice, I don't know. I guarantee he's got his hands on it tonight because that was a big-time play in that game. Georgia has a notebook page full of guys out right now. I'm going to tell you what didn't go right for them yesterday to put into context how impressive this win was. They got a whole notebook page full of guys out. They were not particularly great offensively or defensively on third down yesterday. They had some penalties, and they won. And they won even with Mark Stoops going full Ramen Noodle Express play calling and decision-making final minute of the game, which I respect. I always think you should coach to cover. Coach to cover. Winners win, but champions cover. And Mark Stoops covered yesterday for everybody. These two teams right now, Georgia and Alabama, are being talked about in a different way than they were a couple of weeks ago. A couple of weeks ago, remember, it's these two teams and then it's everybody else. Now a lot of people are saying it's Georgia and then it's everyone else. No, it's not. No, and there's not a wide gap between these teams either. I know that for rankings purposes, you have to make it that way because one is undefeated and one is not. I get that. I don't have a problem with that. I don't live in that world. I'm telling you there's no gap between these teams. There wasn't before. And even with Bama losing, there's not now. There's probably, according to us, like if I were to put a line on the game, you got Georgia by 1, Georgia by 2. This is under a field goal line. Regardless of where you play it, neutral side, of course, it's under a field goal line. And that's not going to change unless you have Bryce Young out injured. There is no gap between these teams. Record notwithstanding, there's no gap between these teams right now. So you've got probably a collision course that's setting itself up in Atlanta, Georgia in December. We don't have to talk about it every day. It'll come. No matter how impatient you are, don't worry, it'll come. Looking forward to it, though.